Most people spend their lives trying to gain power without realizing they lost it long ago. Every time you seek approval, explain yourself, or react emotionally, you surrender another piece of your authority. Machiavelli understood something that still terrifies people today. Before you can rule the world around you, you must first become the ruler of yourself. Tonight, you'll discover the mindset that separates ordinary men from those history never forgets. Look around. Every room you enter is divided into two kinds of people: those who are ruled and those who rule. The difference has almost nothing to do with money, titles, fame, or status. Some of the most powerful people in history began with nothing but an unshakable mind, while countless kings lost entire kingdoms because they never learned to govern themselves. That is the first lesson of The Prince. Power is never inherited for long. It must be recreated every single day. Most people misunderstand Niccolò Machiavelli. They imagine a man obsessed with manipulation, deception, and ruthless ambition. But beneath the political strategy lies a far deeper truth, one that very few readers ever notice. His greatest lesson was never about controlling others. It was about becoming impossible to control yourself. And that journey begins with a brutal realization. You have been trained to surrender your power long before anyone ever tried to take it. Since childhood, you were rewarded for obedience. You learned to avoid conflict, to seek approval, to apologize even when you had done nothing wrong, to make yourself smaller so everyone else could feel comfortable. Every compliment reinforced the same invisible command: be agreeable, be predictable, be easy to manage. Without realizing it, you built your entire identity around external permission. You learned to measure your worth through the reactions of other people. Their praise became your fuel, their criticism became your prison. The prince rejects this completely. Because a ruler who depends on applause has already surrendered the throne. Think carefully. How many decisions have you made simply because you feared disappointing someone? How many dreams have you postponed because someone else might disagree? How many times have you explained yourself, not because explanation was necessary, but because silence made you uncomfortable? Every unnecessary explanation is a quiet confession. It says, "Please understand me." But the prince understands something different. Not everyone deserves access to your reasons. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Sometimes silence communicates more confidence than an hour of speaking. Notice the people who naturally command respect. They rarely rush to defend themselves. They do not argue over every accusation. They do not chase every misunderstanding. Why? Because they understand a law that governs human psychology. The person who constantly seeks validation hands other people the authority to approve or reject them. And once someone possesses that authority, they possess you. The prince refuses that exchange. His confidence is internal. His direction comes from principles, not popularity. Imagine standing in the middle of a violent storm. The trees bend violently, branches snap, leaves scatter across the ground. But beneath the surface, an ancient mountain remains completely still. The storm cannot negotiate with the mountain. It cannot shame it. It cannot flatter it. It cannot frighten it. The mountain simply exists. This is what inner authority feels like. Not loud, not aggressive, simply immovable. Modern society encourages the opposite. We live inside an economy of attention. Everyone competes to be seen, to be liked, to be shared, to be applauded. People broadcast every achievement, every opinion, every emotion, every frustration. They confuse visibility with influence, but visibility is not power. Sometimes visibility is vulnerability. The prince understands scarcity. He knows that what is constantly available eventually becomes ordinary. That includes words, opinions, attention, even your presence. He speaks only when speaking improves the situation. Otherwise, silence becomes strategy. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming deliberate. There is enormous difference. Most people react. The prince responds. Most people defend. The prince observes. Most people chase opportunities. The prince creates conditions where opportunities approach him. This shift changes everything. Because the moment you stop chasing approval, people begin wondering what gives you such certainty. Curiosity replaces pity. Respect replaces familiarity. Influence replaces desperation. That transformation begins with discipline. Not physical discipline, mental discipline. The discipline to control impulses before they control you. Anyone can remain calm when life is easy. Anyone can appear wise when nothing challenges them. Character is revealed only under pressure. When someone insults you, who is truly in control? The person speaking or the person choosing how to respond? Most people mistake emotional reaction for strength. They believe immediate retaliation proves confidence. In reality, impulsive reactions reveal dependence. They show that someone else successfully reached inside your mind and pressed the correct button. The prince guards those buttons carefully, not because he feels nothing, but because he refuses to become predictable. Predictability creates vulnerability. If everyone knows exactly how you'll react, they know exactly how to manipulate you. This is why emotional mastery becomes political mastery. Long before you influence others, you must become impossible to provoke. Imagine carrying a cup filled to the very edge with water. Every insult, every inconvenience, every disappointment, every betrayal causes the water to spill. Now imagine carrying the same cup after years of training. The road is rough. People bump into you. Chaos surrounds you. Yet almost nothing spills. The cup didn't become lighter. You became steadier. That is the prince mindset. Not removing difficulty, becoming larger than difficulty. History remembers leaders who remained composed while everyone else panicked. Because calmness creates confidence, and confidence attracts followers. When people see someone whose emotions remain stable under pressure, they instinctively trust that person with greater responsibility. Whether in business, relationships, leadership, or life, composure becomes invisible authority. But there is another lesson few understand. Power is not measured by what you can force people to do. It is measured by what you never have to force. The strongest leader rarely raises his voice. The strongest negotiator rarely threatens. The strongest competitor rarely boasts. Why? Because true strength doesn't advertise itself. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't demand recognition. Like fire hidden beneath stone, its presence is felt long before it is seen. That is why the prince spends more time building himself than proving himself. He understands that appearances eventually collapse if they aren't supported by substance. Reputation begins in public. Authority begins in private. The private habits no one applauds. The mornings nobody photographs. The discipline nobody celebrates. The promises you keep when nobody would know if you broke them. Those moments forge the invisible architecture of power. Every decision becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. Eventually, those votes create a ruler or a servant. The choice happens quietly. Every day, every hour, every decision. Most people wait for power before acting differently. The prince acts differently before power arrives, because he knows something the world constantly forgets. The crown is never placed upon the head first. It is built inside the mind. Only then does the world begin to notice what was there all along. Why some people command respect before they speak. Walk into any room and pay close attention. Before a single word is spoken, before introductions are made, before anyone knows your name, judgments have already begun. Within seconds, people have unconsciously decided whether you are someone to follow, someone to challenge, or someone to ignore. They don't do this logically. They do it instinctively. Human beings survived for thousands of years by reading invisible signals. Long before language evolved, our ancestors had to determine who represented safety, who represented danger, and who possessed authority. That ancient mechanism still operates inside every modern conversation. The prince understands this. Power begins long before persuasion. It begins with perception. Most people make the mistake of believing that respect is earned only after proving themselves. So they talk too much. They explain too much. They try to impress everyone they meet. Ironically, every attempt to force respect pushes it further away. Real authority works in reverse. It creates curiosity before certainty. Think about the most influential person you've ever met. Maybe they weren't the loudest. Maybe they didn't dominate every conversation. Perhaps they even spoke less than everyone else. Yet when they finally said something, the entire room listened. Why? Because scarcity creates value. Words lose weight when they are constantly spent. Silence increases the value of speech. Machiavelli observed that appearances shape political reality more than objective truth. People respond to what they perceive, not necessarily to what exists. This principle remains just as true today. Every interaction becomes a performance, whether intentional or unconscious. Your posture communicates before your voice. Your pace communicates before your ideas. Your emotional stability communicates before your arguments. Everything speaks, even your silence, especially your silence. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill every pause because quietness feels uncomfortable. But silence has extraordinary psychological power. It forces other people to reveal themselves. Notice what happens during negotiations. The inexperienced person speaks first, explains first, justifies first. The experienced negotiator waits. The longer the silence lasts, the greater the pressure becomes. Eventually, someone breaks it, usually the weaker side. The prince understands that whoever controls the pace often controls the outcome. Patience becomes a strategic advantage. Modern life encourages speed, fast replies, fast opinions, fast reactions, fast decisions. Everything rewards immediacy, but power moves differently. Power moves slowly, not because it lacks urgency, because it lacks desperation. There is an enormous difference. Desperate people chase opportunities. Powerful people evaluate them. Desperate people interrupt. Powerful people observe. Desperate people seek attention. Powerful people attract attention without demanding it. The difference isn't personality, it's self-possession. Imagine two leaders entering the same meeting. The first arrives talking loudly, shaking every hand, trying to become the center of attention immediately. The second enters calmly. He notices the room before speaking. He studies faces, body language, energy, conversations. He listens. Only after understanding the environment does he contribute. Who possesses greater influence? Most people assume confidence means expressing yourself constantly. The prince knows confidence often means resisting the urge to speak, because information has value. Every personal story, every emotional confession, every future plan, every hidden insecurity becomes a piece of your psychological blueprint. And once people possess enough pieces, they can predict you. Prediction leads to manipulation. Think about chess. The strongest players don't reveal their strategy after every move. They allow uncertainty to exist. Their opponent spends more energy guessing than attacking. Life operates similarly. If everyone knows your next step, your emotional triggers, your ambitions, your fears, you become easier to influence. The prince doesn't lie. He simply understands that not every truth requires immediate disclosure. Mystery creates space. Space creates respect. Respect creates influence. Another invisible law governs every relationship. Familiarity without boundaries breeds contempt. At first, this sounds harsh, but observe it carefully. People often appreciate what requires effort. They frequently overlook what is permanently available. This applies to opportunities, friendships, leadership, even love. When your time costs nothing, people spend it carelessly. When your attention is unlimited, people stop appreciating it. When your availability becomes constant, your presence loses significance. The prince protects access to himself, not because he believes he is superior, because he understands value. A diamond remains precious because it is rare, not because it tries to convince anyone of its worth. Scarcity speaks without words. Boundaries are the architecture of scarcity. Unfortunately, many people mistake boundaries for arrogance. They believe saying no makes them selfish. In reality, every meaningful achievement requires the courage to disappoint someone. You cannot build an extraordinary life while trying to satisfy everyone's expectations. The prince chooses priorities over popularity. This choice often appears cold from the outside, but internally, it creates freedom. There is another lesson even more important. Authority is not built by controlling other people. It is built by controlling your own reactions. Imagine someone insults you publicly. Most people immediately defend themselves. They argue, raise their voice, explain, attack. But something fascinating happens psychologically. The moment you react impulsively, the other person has already succeeded. They controlled your behavior. The prince refuses to surrender that control. He understands that every emotional reaction reveals information. Frustration exposes insecurity. Anger exposes attachment. Defensiveness exposes dependence. Calmness reveals none of these. Calmness becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability creates psychological caution. People naturally become more careful around individuals they cannot easily read. Not because they are afraid, because uncertainty commands attention. This doesn't require manipulation, it requires discipline. There is tremendous strength in becoming difficult to provoke, not impossible to feel, impossible to control. That distinction changes everything. As your emotional discipline increases, your dependence on external circumstances decreases. Praise no longer intoxicates you. Criticism no longer destroys you. Success no longer inflates your ego. Failure no longer defines your identity. Your center of gravity moves inward. That is where real authority begins. Eventually, people notice something different about you, not because you announced it, not because you demanded respect, because your behavior becomes consistent with inner confidence. You stop competing for attention. Ironically, attention starts competing for you. This is the paradox the prince understands. The harder you chase influence, the further it escapes. The more completely you master yourself, the less effort influence requires. Power, then, is not something you seize. It is something you quietly become. And once you become it, the world begins treating you accordingly. Why the strongest position is the one that needs nothing. There is a moment in every person's life when they unknowingly choose between power and dependence. It doesn't happen on a battlefield. It doesn't happen inside a palace. It happens in ordinary moments. The unanswered message, the rejected proposal, the lost opportunity, the criticism that stings more than it should. Most people respond the same way. They chase, they explain, they convince. They negotiate their own value. And without realizing it, every desperate pursuit sends the same invisible message. I need something from you. The prince understands one of the oldest laws of power. The person who needs the least controls the most. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It doesn't mean isolating yourself from the world. It means removing desperation from your decisions. Because desperation clouds judgment. It shortens vision. It makes intelligent people accept poor opportunities simply because they fear having none. Imagine standing in the middle of a desert. If you haven't had water for days, you'll drink from almost any source. Even poisoned water begins to look valuable. The same thing happens psychologically. When you become emotionally thirsty for approval, you'll accept disrespect. When you become desperate for love, you'll tolerate manipulation. When you're starving for recognition, you'll work endlessly for people who never intended to appreciate you. Need distorts perception, and distorted perception destroys power. This is why the prince builds his kingdom internally before seeking influence externally. He creates abundance inside himself, because abundance changes behavior. A wealthy merchant negotiates differently than a starving beggar. A confident leader speaks differently than someone terrified of rejection. A person who knows their worth walks away from situations others cling to, not because walking away is easy, because staying would cost something more valuable, their self-respect. One of Machiavelli's greatest observations was that people often mistake kindness for weakness when kindness comes without boundaries. True generosity has limits. Servitude does not. Many people spend their lives confusing the two. They say yes when they mean no. They volunteer for burdens that aren't theirs. They solve problems nobody asked them to solve. They sacrifice their own future, hoping someone will eventually reward their loyalty. But the reward rarely comes, because human nature quietly adapts. What begins as gratitude slowly becomes expectation. Imagine someone carrying your backpack every single day. At first, you're thankful. After a month, it feels normal. After a year, you stop noticing the effort. Then, one day, they refuse. Suddenly, they appear selfish. Nothing changed except your expectations. This is how dependence is created, not through cruelty, through unlimited availability. The prince understands something difficult to accept. Every unnecessary sacrifice teaches people how much of you they are allowed to consume. If you never defend your time, people will schedule your life for you. If you never defend your peace, people will fill it with chaos. If you never defend your standards, others will lower them without asking permission. Power begins with protecting what matters, not attacking others, protecting yourself. That protection often looks invisible. It is the meeting you decline, the argument you refuse, the invitation you politely reject, the phone call you don't immediately return, the project you say no to because it would steal energy from something greater. Each decision appears insignificant. Together, they define your life. Most people imagine discipline as forcing yourself to do difficult things. The prince sees another form of discipline, the discipline of refusal, the courage to disappoint today in order to build tomorrow. Every meaningful achievement demands sacrifice, but not all sacrifices are equal. Some investments multiply your future, others quietly bankrupt it. The wise learn the difference. Think of a castle. Its strength isn't measured only by its walls, it is measured by its gates. Who is allowed inside? Who remains outside? Who receives access? Who waits? Your mind works the same way. Every opinion doesn't deserve entry. Every criticism doesn't deserve attention. Every conflict doesn't deserve participation. Every person doesn't deserve unlimited access to your time. Without gates, even the strongest castle eventually falls. Most people have built walls around their dreams, but left the gates wide open. Anyone may enter. Anyone may interrupt. Anyone may influence their direction. The prince guards both, because attention is finite, energy is finite, time is finite. Spend them carelessly, and you'll eventually discover that your greatest ambitions died from 1,000 tiny distractions rather than one great failure. Modern society profits from distraction. Every notification competes for your attention. Every opinion competes for your emotions. Every headline competes for your outrage. Attention has become the world's most valuable currency, and most people give it away freely. The prince spends it like gold. He asks a simple question before investing emotional energy. Will this matter 1 year from now? If the answer is no, he moves on. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with stones. Every insult adds another. Every online argument adds another. Every unnecessary worry adds another. Eventually, the weight becomes unbearable. Yet none of those stones were mandatory. You chose to carry them, one by one. The prince travels differently. He carries only what strengthens him. Everything else remains on the ground. This doesn't make life easier. It makes him lighter. There is another truth few people accept. You cannot become extraordinary while remaining available to everyone's expectations. Growth requires seasons of absence. Periods where the world hears less from you because you're becoming someone new. During those seasons, people may misunderstand you. Some will accuse you of changing. They're right. You're supposed to change. The seed disappears before becoming a tree. The caterpillar vanishes before becoming a butterfly. Transformation has always required temporary disappearance. Yet many people interrupt their own evolution because they fear making others uncomfortable. The prince accepts misunderstanding as the price of progress. He no longer needs universal approval. He needs alignment with his purpose. That single shift changes every decision. Eventually, something remarkable begins to happen. The opportunities you once chased begin finding you. Not through luck, through reputation, because disciplined people become rare, reliable people become valuable, emotionally stable people become unforgettable. Their presence carries weight because it is built upon substance rather than performance. Others begin trusting them with responsibility, leadership, influence, opportunity. Not because they demanded any of it, because they demonstrated they could carry it. The prince never asks the world to believe in him first. He believes in the discipline he practices when no one is watching. That discipline becomes character. Character becomes reputation. Reputation becomes influence. And influence creates power that no title can grant and no enemy can easily destroy. This is why the prince never chases. He builds quietly, patiently, relentlessly, until one day, the very things he once pursued begin walking toward him. Because the strongest position in life has never belonged to the loudest voice. It has always belonged to the person who has mastered the art of needing less and becoming more. The final law every prince must learn. There comes a moment when every student of power faces the same question. Not, how do I gain more influence? But, what kind of person will I become once I have it? This is the question that separates rulers from tyrants. Because power does not transform character, it reveals it. Many people dream about becoming wealthy, powerful, respected, influential. They imagine those things will finally make them confident. But confidence cannot be purchased. It cannot be inherited. It cannot be borrowed from titles or applause. If insecurity governs your mind today, power will only magnify it tomorrow. History proves this again and again. Some leaders built civilizations, others destroyed them. The difference was rarely intelligence, it was self-mastery. The prince understands that external victories mean very little if internal chaos remains undefeated. Imagine owning an enormous kingdom while living as a prisoner inside your own thoughts. Every criticism wounds you. Every insult follows you home. Every betrayal consumes your sleep. Every setback shakes your identity. Who truly rules in that situation? You or your emotions? The greatest prison has never been built from stone. It has always been built from impulses left unconquered. This is why the final lesson of the prince has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with sovereignty. Real sovereignty begins the moment your peace no longer depends on circumstances, when success no longer intoxicates you, failure no longer defines you, praise no longer controls you, criticism no longer owns you. You become something rare, someone who cannot easily be manipulated. Most people spend their lives trying to control events. The prince learns to control responses because events belong to chance. Responses belong to character. There will always be dishonest people. There will always be betrayal, competition, loss, unexpected hardship. You cannot eliminate uncertainty, but you can eliminate unnecessary panic. Think about the ocean. Storms constantly disturb its surface. Massive waves rise and crash without warning. Yet thousands of meters below, everything remains calm. That is emotional depth. Most people live entirely on the surface. Every inconvenience becomes a storm. Every opinion becomes a crisis. Every disappointment becomes an identity. The prince lives differently. His emotions exist, but they no longer command him. They inform him, never govern him. This is where discipline reaches its highest form. Not waking up early, not working harder, not speaking less. Those are valuable, but they are only preparation. The highest discipline is becoming the author of your own behavior. Imagine someone insulting you publicly. The old version of yourself reacts immediately. Your heart races, your voice changes, your ego demands revenge. But now imagine another possibility. You hear every word, you feel the emotional surge, yet something inside remains untouched. You pause, you breathe, you decide. Instead of reacting automatically, You choose intentionally. That tiny space between emotion and action is where freedom lives. Most people never discover it. They spend decades believing their feelings are commands. The prince knows feelings are information, nothing more. Anger can reveal injustice. Fear can reveal preparation. Sadness can reveal attachment. But none of them deserve absolute authority. Because emotions are temporary visitors. Principles are permanent rulers. This distinction changes everything. Another misunderstanding about power must also disappear. Many believe leadership means controlling people. The prince understands leadership begins with responsibility. Real leaders absorb pressure. They do not spread panic. They create clarity during confusion, direction during uncertainty, calm during chaos. People naturally follow those who remain steady, while everyone else loses balance. This is why composure becomes influence. Not because calmness looks impressive, because calmness creates trust. Trust creates leadership. Leadership creates power. Without trust, power becomes fear. And fear never lasts forever. History remembers countless rulers who governed through intimidation. Most eventually fell. But those who inspired disciplined respect left something greater than empires. They left legacies. Legacy is the highest expression of power because influence continues after presence disappears. Ask yourself an uncomfortable question. If everything you owned disappeared tomorrow, your money, your status, your career, your reputation, who would remain? Would there still be discipline, integrity, wisdom, courage? Or would your identity disappear with your possessions? The prince builds what cannot be stolen: knowledge, character, judgment, patience, resilience. No thief can steal them, no economy can crash them, no rival can permanently destroy them. These become the true treasures of a ruler. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop measuring success by applause. You stop comparing your journey to others. You stop competing for attention. Instead, you compete only against yesterday's version of yourself. That competition never ends, because mastery has no finish line. Each victory reveals another lesson. Each lesson reveals another weakness. Each weakness becomes another opportunity for growth. The prince never believes he has arrived. Arrogance marks the beginning of decline. Humility protects continuous improvement. This is perhaps Machiavelli's most misunderstood truth. Power is never permanent. Every day either strengthens your position or weakens it. Every habit builds your kingdom or slowly dismantles it. Every decision becomes another brick or another crack. Nothing remains still. Life is always moving. The question is only whether it moves with you or against you. And so, before this journey ends, remember one final principle. Never seek power simply to stand above others. Seek power so you will never again have to live beneath your own fears. Because the greatest victory is not defeating enemies. It is becoming someone your former self would hardly recognize, a person who no longer begs for approval, no longer fears rejection, no longer abandons principles for comfort, no longer lives according to the expectations of the crowd. That person has already become a prince. Not because the world crowned them, because they first learned to govern themselves. And once a person rules their own mind, the world becomes a place to navigate, not a place to fear. Power begins there. It always has. It always will.